It's one of the top races you'll see in the March primary. 11 Texans are in the running for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate.
We don't get to see a lot of people that are reflective of our experiences and values running for office.
It's a wide open race, but some candidates are beginning to rise above the field.
I have the support of other Democratic colleagues as it relates to how I will attack those issues.
This week we'll bring you perspective from two of the top candidates in this key race on the Texas ballot. An envelope holding cocaine leads to trouble for a state representative. How a drug charge could end the career of this influential Texas lawmaker. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Poncho Nevarez was a rising star at the state capitol. The Democrat leads the influential House Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee. Nevarez is also the vice chair of a select committee looking for solutions to stop mass shootings. So it surprised people this week when Nevarez announced he would not run for re-election. That surprise turned to shock on Thursday when authorities issued a warrant for his arrest. He's accused of felony cocaine possession, and Nevarez admitted he has a problem with addiction. The details are in a Department of Public Safety affidavit for a search warrant filed in Travis County. The incident happened in early September at the TxDOT Flight Services facility at Austin's airport. Nevarez was getting picked up after arriving on a plane owned by his law group. According to the affidavit, he dropped a sealed envelope. A TxDOT worker found it. According to the responding DPS special agent, the envelope had his office letterhead on it, and inside, cocaine. Nevarez admits he has an addiction. In a statement, he says, "I do not have anyone to blame but myself. In a weird way, I am grateful. Grief and addiction were consuming me."
The first step is really saying, I've got this problem and I need to go and get some help for it.
Laura Sovine leads Austin Recovery.
Once a disorder has become to the point of lying and hiding, it means that the severity is pretty intense and that this is probably happening often. This is probably happening in places that it shouldn't be happening. And then the stakes get higher and higher. And of course, if you have a public persona and you are in a trusted office, the stakes get even higher.
The Texas Democratic Party issued a statement wishing Nevarez and his family the best during his recovery. Nevarez has been at the center of controversy before at the Capitol. You may remember he was involved in a near fist fight on the House floor on the last day of the 2017 session. The conflict came after Republican Representative Matt Rinaldi told lawmakers he called Immigration and Customs Enforcement after seeing some protesters holding signs saying they were illegal immigrants. That's when things got physical.
Yeah, I mean, the guy made a comment, a very stupid comment. He's a racist. He's a bad person. We're not going to allow people like that to get away with saying comments like that.
The skirmish on the floor happened in response to a protest over Senate Bill 4, the so-called Sanctuary Cities law. Nevarez is also known for being a strong advocate for people along the border. Earlier this year, he spoke about the need to bring additional resources to the region.
We need some help with infrastructure, and that means better roads. People are dying out there because we have an economic boom that's generated by oil and gas that's causing a lot of problems with our infrastructure. That's a crisis.
Nevarez is also an advocate for stricter gun laws. In his role on the Mass Violence Prevention Committee, he called for red flag laws and measures to expand background checks for gun purchases. A Texas House committee met at the Capitol Tuesday to take a closer look at how the state investigates claims of child abuse. The hearing comes after reports of children being taken from their parents after doctors misidentified signs of abuse. As Alex Caparello shows us, families shared their stories of personal heartbreak.
Oh, gosh. A heartbreaking moment as Child Protective Services takes away 2 children. At the time, doctors had incorrectly said the infant was abused.
This is Texas trying to take these kids away.
This might sound familiar. We told you Jason and Lorena Troy's story last month. Today, the family shared it again in front of the Texas House Committee on Human Services.
The judge signed off on the emergency removal of my 2 sons, who were only 4 years old and 6 months old at the time. There was never any evidence of any child abuse.
The Troys aren't alone.
Hippocratic oath has become hypocritical. We never did anything.
Giselle Guerrero and her husband, Andre, 7-month-old, was taken away when a doctor reported abuse. In reality, the baby had hit his head after falling off the bed.
I think the problem here is basically that the doctors have too much power. I know it's a very difficult decision for them, but I think that CPS should ask for a second opinion.
Families say there should be more oversight and a system of checks and balances among CPS, doctors, and judges. Doctors today testified they work in the best interest of their patients always and don't want to hesitate if they do suspect abuse. DFPS officials told me they welcome the opportunity to work with legislators to improve the system.
I understand that laws can't be changed until 2021, but policies and procedures can be changed much sooner.
Alex Capriello for State of Texas.
Some lawmakers floated the idea of creating ways for families to request a second medical opinion before the state can remove a child from a home. The committee chairman expects to hold more hearings in the interim to find ways to improve the system. A Texas state senator looks to make a move to Capitol Hill.
I'm not hyper-partisan, and that what I do is build coalitions based on interest, not party affiliation.
Up next, a deeper dive into the race for U.S. Senate. We'll interview two of the top candidates in this key race in the Texas primary. Royce West has served more than 25 years in the Texas Senate. Now he's hoping to make a move to Washington. He's one of the top candidates in the March primary to decide who will challenge incumbent Senator John Cornyn. The race for Senate will be one of the key races in the Texas primary. We want to help you learn more about the candidates now. Joining us is Democratic candidate Royce West. Welcome.
Josh, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you very much.
Great.
Appreciate you being here. You've represented the Dallas area in the Texas Senate since 1993.
Correct.
Folks there know about your records, but what do you want voters across the state to know?
What I want them to know is that I've been a leader in areas of education, criminal justice, health and human services, issues concerning the border, women's issues, climate change issues, across the board issues that Democrats care about, citizens care about, I've led on. And the other piece is this: when you begin to think about the experience factor and the support factor, I want them to know that of the 12 Democratic senators that we have, 10 of them, including myself, support my candidacy for the United States Senate. And of the 67 House members that are Democrats, 49 support my candidacy for the United States Senate. What that says is that in all probability, most of the leadership that has been elected by Democrats in this state that will form the basis of the Democratic primary, those persons that they've elected recognize what I've done, my experience factor, and is supportive of me.
A lot of experience and support. One of the top issues for Texas voters, though, is health care. What would you do as a senator to provide affordable health care?
Well, I think, first of all, we've got to figure out who the president's going to be, because the president will lead from that. But you can be assured that what I will make certain of is that pre-existing conditions are one of the provisions that we'll have. We will improve on the Obamacare legislation. I'm still a person that believes that if a person wants to have choice in terms of health care, they should be able to have that. Persons who want to be able to get involved in a government-sponsored program should be able to do that.
Now, you've said if elected, you would work on immigration reform. What does that mean to you? What would change?
Well, first of all, I want to, in terms of comments on the DACA issue that's present right now, and we've heard that some of the pundits talk about exactly how the Supreme Court took the arguments, and I understand that there's some comments out by the president basically saying that all DACA persons are criminals. Come on, Mr. President. Please stop the vicious rhetoric. Those kids that are involved in the DACA program are kids that have done everything that they needed to do here in this country, and we've got to find a way to make certain that they stay in this country. And that may very well end up being a legislative solution. So if the president's not going to do it by executive order, then we need to figure out a way to get it done. That's number one. In terms of the border itself, we need to make certain that we have adjudication, have more judges down there, put more resources so we can adjudicate the asylum claims.
Now, right after you announced your campaign, Senator Cornyn launched an attack ad targeting you specifically on your record on abortion rights and gun control. Do you think your views on those issues match up with the beliefs of most Texans?
I do. The fact of the matter is when you go back to 1993, I've been an advocate in terms of trying to balance the Second Amendment with, common sense gun laws when Ann Richards was governor. And I supported then, as I do now, a ban on assault weapons. We saw the Supreme Court recently say that a lawsuit based on Sandy Hook, the manufacturers of those guns in Sandy Hook can now go forward. We've seen Coat and other manufacturers talk about no longer manufacturing assault weapons. So we've seen a change in this country, and we've seen a change also in this state based on the number of mass shootings we've had. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that having this type of legislation would have prevented those mass shootings, but the reality is that we have to take some initiatives, some steps that are consistent with common sense gun laws and still maintaining the intent of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little more specifically. On guns, a lot of people do want action, but divisions in Congress have stopped progress on any legislation like you talk about. What would you do specifically to get results?
Well, I mean, the reality is I would support a ban on assault weapons. I would do that. I would support background checks, red flag laws. I'd support all of those things. Corning has not done that. And, you know, I think he's out of step with most Texans on that issue. We'll find out very soon.
Now, the ideas that you've laid out are similar to some of the ideas we're hearing from other Democratic candidates. What makes you the best candidate to face Senator Cornyn?
Well, the reality is this. It's not like I've just started talking about these solutions, okay? I have been talking about and taking action towards trying to implement them since 1993 through legislation and through attempting to make certain my colleagues on both sides of the aisle would be comfortable with it, and more people are becoming comfortable with these. So I would make certain that I would be consistent in terms of reaching across the aisle as best possible once I'm elected to U.S. Senator to make sure we have common sense gun laws.
Senator, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
She's a military veteran who's looking to make a mark in politics.
People in Texas want to see action. They want to see a change. They're not seeing that action from John Cornyn, and that's a big part of why I'm running to defeat him.
MJ Hegar is leading the polls and the fundraising in the race for Senate. We'll hear her ideas on the issues next on State of Texas. 11 Texans have announced plans to run for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. We're less than 4 months away from the primary. So far, the race appears to be wide open, but some candidates are showing signs of strength when it comes to raising campaign cash. In the last quarterly filing period, 3 candidates reported having more than $500,000 to spend on their campaigns. That includes Royce West, who you just heard from, and Amanda Edwards, who's currently a Houston City Council member. But one candidate clearly leads the field when it comes to fundraising. Retired Air Force officer and former congressional candidate MJ Hegar topped all candidates with more than $2 million in donations. Our Wes Rappaport sat down with Hegar to get insight on her campaign and her stance on key issues for Texas voters.
We're now joined by MJ Hegar, a Democrat running for the party's nomination for U.S. Senate. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us on.
So you are an Air Force veteran, you're a mom, you're a former congressional candidate. What else should the Texas voters know about you?
You know, I was raised here. I was raised in very rural Texas, and I think that we don't really get the option to vote for people who were raised just like us and are just like us and are working people. You know, I come from a blue-collar family. I was the first person in my college, or in my family, to graduate from college. We don't get to see a lot of people that are reflective of our experiences and values running for office.
You ran, of course, in 2018 for Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might remember you from that. You lost in a close race. Why take this leap for Senate? Why not try for the House again?
I think I would if the goal was just to get to elected office, but that was never the goal. The goal is, as a medevac pilot, I've flown wildfire suppression before, so the metaphor that I always think about is I try to find the biggest bucket of water I can and dump it on the biggest fire I can find. And I believe that, you know, somebody will beat John Carter this cycle. A big problem in that district was it was so gerrymandered that people thought nobody could win, and I showed that somebody can win that district, and so I don't think they need me there. But John Cornyn, as our senator, has got to go and is really hurting Texas, and that's where I see the fire right now. So if I can do something about it, I'm obligated to give it a go.
I want to ask you a little bit about this open letter to Senator Cornyn
Yes.
About gun violence.
The first draft was even more strongly worded.
So,
Yeah.
you know, this is obviously a time where
Yeah.
Congress is divided, and,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of division, you know, around the country. What do you want to change about gun laws, and how do you go about tackling that?
Yeah. I'm a responsible gun owner. I'm a combat vet. I've seen what these guns can do. I've seen what their purpose is. I'm also a mom. I have small kids. I understand that mass violence, gun mass shootings is certainly a threat to them. I'm terrified of sending them to school. And as a responsible gun owner, like most people in Texas, I want to see more gun safety. The problem is we have so many people in office that are taking so much money from the gun lobby that they can't even come together on something that 90% of our country wants to see, things like universal background checks. So there are many things, and we don't have enough time for me to list the things that I think that we need to do. What I can tell you is that the most important thing is that we aim for culture change and not just legislation change, and we can get there. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when seatbelt laws were supposed to be a big infringement on our constitutional rights, and now it's a cultural thing. You get in a car, you put on your seatbelt, or else you feel weird, and the rest of the people in the car look at you funny, and we can get there with gun safety. And frankly, the gun violence epidemic, which extends way past mass shootings into domestic violence and suicide and accidental shootings, it does also represent the greatest threat to our Second Amendment rights. So people in Texas want to see action. They want to see a change. They're not seeing that action from John Cornyn, and that's a big part of why I'm running to defeat him.
Let me ask you about healthcare real quick. Texas ranking near the bottom and at the bottom in a lot of cases in terms of healthcare for its citizens. What would you do there?
Texans are so proud of Texas, and it really rankles when we hear things like maternal mortality rates competing with third world countries, with highest number and rate of uninsured kids and people in the country. Those things are really embarrassing to us Texans. We can do better. We owe our kids better. I was working for a healthcare network when I had my first pre-existing condition growing in my belly, my first kiddo, and I was getting laid off from my job, and I was terrified. And I thought back to when was I taken the best care of? And it was when I was in the military under TRICARE, which is basically Medicare for military. So I wish that I could have gotten back to that at the time, and I want all of my neighbors and my family and my friends to have access to Medicare. We should open eligibility up to everybody, but we can't forget that we're a nation and a state of freedom and choices, and that we should leave that as a choice for people.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about immigration. It's been on the minds of a lot of folks, especially with this conversation about DACA and the Supreme Court earlier this week. You've called the immigration system broken. What would you do to fix it?
There's so much we need to do, but I can tell you that I've served alongside people who are pursuing citizenship through military service. I believe that the people who are DACA recipients represent the best of us. There are people who say, that people who want to be citizens in our country should, quote, do it the right way or stand in line or whatever the things that you hear. DACA represents people who are, going through the process. I think that we need to respect the processes that we do have in place. We need to support DACA recipients and make sure that they know that the only country that they've ever known is not going to be taken away from them. But we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to fully fund our immigration courts. Bottom line, there's a lot that needs to be done. We should be starting this conversation, talking to the communities on the border, talking to the people who are on the front lines of this. We need gun trafficking laws, stronger gun trafficking laws, because right now we're sending 250,000 weapons south of the border, which causes a violence epidemic, which causes a humanitarian crisis. And none of these things are being addressed because John Cornyn is taking money from the private prison industry. They have a vested interest in keeping their detention facilities full. But people are so fed up with John Cornyn, with his low approval ratings, that I know that regardless of who's at the top of the ticket, when they go into the ballot box next November, they're going to know they can choose a spineless yes man who asks his party how to vote, or they can choose a combat vet who's bled for our Constitution and a working mom who shares their values. And I think that's going to be a clear choice.
We'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Deadly mass shootings have grabbed headlines in Texas in recent months, but the trail of tragedies goes back for decades. We're looking closer at the history of mass violence across Texas as state leaders look for solutions to stop shootings like these. The Walmart in El Paso reopened Thursday, more than 3 months after a gunman killed 22 people inside. An El Paso Strong banner hangs on the building. Investigators say the gunman wanted to target Mexicans. State leaders are looking at ways to stop and better respond to shootings like these. Our investigative team is taking a closer look at the history of mass violence across Texas over the last 40 years. Here's a first look.
The town was shocked when a man dressed in full combat gear burst into the crowded church.
Opened fire with rifles, and as I say, 5 were killed.
He was actually in Walmart when he called me to let me know he was okay.
I heard pop, 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 like firecrackers. And I got up and ran over there to her, and I shook her, and I knew it wasn't going to be okay.
My son and my husband were both involved in the 2 largest shootings in El Paso.
My hand was, full of blood.
Put him in a bear hug.
Gunshots start exploding.
A firestorm of bullets. The 35-year-old gunman is
We have an active shooter.
The shooter in Sutherland Springs should not have been able to buy the gun. And this 2012.
Time is going to help. Time is going to help. I don't want time to take care of it. I want it to be taken care of now.
Our 5-part investigative series launches Monday. That same day, you can find a link to the full project in the Texas Politics section of your station's website. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.